Third part. He is slain, said a voice that seemed to flow across the fog. Here, too, the world was tinged a milky white. Aside from the fog, everything was shadows. Something like pillars, something like stairs, something like statues, all colored by a world of stagnant milk, as if to eternally shield themselves from the flow of time. That was where the words had sprung into being. At the same time, a shadowy figure moved in the vicinity of where the voice had come from. And that movement stopped dead when another voice was heard. It came from ahead of the shadowy figure, from the depths of the swirling fog. Though the voice was that of a young woman, it had a ring of time to it like that of a crown. And you can prove this. He fell into the nothingness. No mathematical construct can exist there. Anything swallowed by something that doesn't exist also ceases to exist there. Correct, Your Grace, replied a vibrant voice, which in sound at least seemed far older than that of the woman. And what is Gildy doing? At present, he's in the medical center recovering from his wounds. It must have been quite an incredible opponent to injure him. It is that Gildy's strength wasn't sufficient to remove the blade stuck in his throat, and that he had to activate a device in the medical center before he finally extricated it. The gravity controller was bearing him back here on autopilot when he lost consciousness. After a short time had passed, the woman said, "His opponent was a Dhampir." She seemed to be putting the question to herself. In all likelihood, and far and away more skilled than the average one. The vibrant voice paused there for a moment. Clearly the speaker was gauging the listener's reaction. Presently he continued. On regaining consciousness, Gildy said his opponent had mentioned your name, even going so far as to inquire as to your condition. Are you familiar with his foe? I know him, she replied in the same tone she'd used up until now. However, the intensity of the emotion that swayed there would be evident to any who heard her. What manner of foe is this? His name is D. Oh, in that case. A horrible sense of turmoil came from the figure in the fog. It was on account of that he stopped in mid-sentence. When we and the island were destroyed, you didn't get a chance to meet the man. Ah, but now I may finally encounter him? Why would this D come to the island, though? Is he not most likely in someone's employ? 7 days ago I rose again. It may well be that he became aware of my resurrection and came here. And how would he become aware of that? What do you know of him? This time, as the woman's voice streamed out, it suggested she couldn't read the vibrant one's mind. Well, nothing. In truth, yes, Your Grace, the man replied, his voice carrying a fear unimaginable from his tone up to that point. After a short pause, the woman continued, You said he was slain, did you not? Yes, Your Grace, he replied in a tone of relief, not due to the woman's question itself, but because he'd bothered to ask. For the D I know, that simply is impossible. We made use of the solar cannon and the nothingness. You could crush the whole Milky Way, and it would still be for naught. The man didn't know what to say to that. Prepare the light shielder. I shall be going out. But that you're giving me a look as if I were going to help him, aren't you, Denai? As you say, Your Grace. Even if that were the case, you could do nothing to stop me. The least you could do is keep me company. A movement took place in a world of silence. The depths of the fog stirred. Another shadowy form had passed beside the man called Denai. A scant amount of light swayed by the figure's chest. Denai halted. One fog eddied with the other, collided, and then separated again. Even after the shadowy figures melted away into the milky whiteness, their respective fogs continued an unending feud, page break indicated by a small cross. On realizing that she was being shaken roughly, the girl awoke. "You okay?" A heavily bearded face Meg couldn't recall seeing before was peering down at her. She leapt up in a hurry. Something ran down her cheek. Sweat. It was strangely hot. "Who are you?" "They call me D'Argent. I'm a survivor of those who came over to the island 107 years back." Meg stared at the man and nearly forgot to breathe. She could understand if he were the descendant of somebody who'd crossed over a century ago, but he claimed to actually be one of the settlers. Now, that's strange, was her first thought. He was too young to be one of them. Under all that beard, his face looked like that of a man about 20, give or take a year. Then, it suddenly hit her. If what he was saying was true, could it be that he was a noble, or some other creature that didn't age? More than the hand she involuntarily raised to the nape of her neck, it was the change in Meg's expression that D'Argent noticed. Grinning wryly, he said, "Oh, you're a sharp one to put this face, and the bit about 107 years ago together. I was subjected to the nobility's experiments. All the others died, I think, and I alone was spared. Ever since, I haven't aged. Just to be perfectly clear, I'm not a victim of the nobility. If I were, you wouldn't have been safe this long." Meg nodded. There were no wounds on her neck, and although they were presently in what seemed to be some sort of cellar, strong light filtered in. It was daytime. Then that woman. The image of the reptilian woman who she could only imagine was a victim of the nobility filled Meg's mind. She hadn't done anything to the girl. "Did you save me? Was there anybody around me?" "No," D'Argent said, shaking his head as he reflected. "I found you by that huge machine. That area used to be another testing facility. But now, as you saw, it's a wasteland. You were lying there alone. Is it okay to go outside?" "Sure," D'Argent responded with a slightly suspicious nod, perhaps having gleaned from Meg's demeanor that she had some important business. The terrain all around was jagged and rocky. It seemed terribly hot there, and gas jetted from a number of spots. Meg looked up at the sun. From its angle and the way it was shining, more than an hour had passed since that incident. But not 2. When she turned around and asked him, D'Argent told Meg about 40 minutes had passed since he'd found her and brought her there. That being the case, what had happened during the other 15 minutes or so? Meg asked about the woman. "I think she was a test subject," D'Argent replied. "What do you mean by that?" "Apparently before we came here, other people had been brought over to the island. They went crazy as a result of the experiments conducted on them, and they were expulsed." "What's an expulse?" "It means they were banished, actually." "Well, why didn't you say that then?" Don't go using fancy words with me. Pardon me. Eyeing the man intently, Meg said, I don't get the sense you're a fisherman. What then? Laughing at the way she framed her question, Dargent replied, I'm an elementary school teacher. I see. Well, that was 100 years ago, right? Don't be acting all uppity just because I'm a fisher, okay? Meg punctuated that with a smile. Even when she had huge arguments with other villagers, that was the wonder drug that always reconciled them immediately. What brings you here? His query was natural enough, and in response Meg looked up at the sun again. His query was natural enough, and in response Meg looked up at the sun again and said, Don't suppose I could tell you along the way, could I? I'm here to save the villagers who were brought over to the island. If you've been here for 100 years, you must know where everything is. I'll make it worth your while. Help me out. Sorry, but no. The man's reply struck Meg so coldly, it took her a moment to say, What? Why not? I really like it here on the island. Thanks to the nobles' furnace, this area is always warm, and there's no shortage of things to eat. Plus, if I were to go home, everyone I knew is dead now. There might be others around like you. I've never met one, but even if there were, they think like I do. With your help, a lot of folks might be saved, and you still won't do it. Sorry. Fine then, Meg said, utterly giving up. Thanks for all you did, and goodbye. Just tell me the lay of the land in the center of the island, and I have one more thing to ask of you. What's that? Don't you ever go telling anyone you're a teacher again. Returning to the cellar, Dargent explained the geography of the area, drawing a map with plant extracts on some sort of animal hide. Give me a little of your food. I'll pay you back later. Saying nothing more, Meg left the rocky area about 20 minutes later. She was incredibly angry, but she pushed forward on foot to keep her temper in check. The rocky terrain extended for more than half a mile in all directions, according to what Dargent had told her, and what was written on the map. There was fog, as usual, but the odor that assailed her nose, like that of sulfur, must have come from the jets of gas all over the place. Just then, from the far reaches of a lumpy plain that seemed to go on forever, a black speck flew into the air. Chapter 4, End.